The galaxy was vast, endless, and mostly silent. Stars burned like tiny pinpricks of light in the blackness, their glow faint and distant. Among these stars, on a small planet called Xylos 4, something unusual was happening. The people of Xylos 4, known as the Vryn, were running out of time. Their world was dying, and they knew it. The sun that gave them warmth and life was growing dimmer with each passing day. The air they breathed was thinning, making it harder to survive. Food was scarce, and hope was even scarcer. For years, the Vryn had tried everything they could think of to save their planet. They built machines to clean the air, but those machines broke down too quickly. They dug deep into the ground to find water, but the wells ran dry. They sent probes into space to search for new resources, but nothing worked. Nothing was enough. As their situation grew worse, the leaders of the Vryn made a decision. If they couldn't save themselves, maybe someone else could. Maybe someone out there in the galaxy would listen, so they sent a message, a cry for help. It wasn't just any message, it was a powerful signal broadcast across the stars in every direction. The message didn't use words or pictures. Instead, it carried feelings, fear, desperation, and a plea for survival. It was designed to reach anyone who might be listening, no matter how far away they were. The Vryn didn't know if anyone would hear them. They didn't even know if anyone cared. But they had to try. Light years away on a spaceship called the Solstice, two humans received the signal. Rachel Meyer and Daniel Harper were explorers, part of Earth's effort to explore the galaxy. Rachel was an astrophysicist, someone who studied stars and planets. She had always been curious about the universe and what lay beyond Earth. Daniel, on the other hand, was an engineer. He was good at fixing things, building things, and solving problems. Together, they made a great team. When the signal from Xylos 4 reached the Solstice, Rachel was the first to notice it. She was sitting at her station staring at a screen filled with lines and numbers. At first, she thought it was just static, random noise floating through space. But then she realized it wasn't random at all. There was a pattern to it, something deliberate. Her heart raced as she listened closely. The signal wasn't in any language she recognized, but she could feel its urgency. It was a call for help. "Daniel," she said, turning to her partner, "you need to hear this." Daniel came over and leaned in to listen. His brow furrowed as he processed the strange sounds. "What is it?" he asked. "It's a distress signal," Rachel replied. "Someone or something is asking for help." They both knew what this meant. Humanity had only recently begun exploring the galaxy, and they weren't the most advanced species out there. Most of the time, humans were seen as newcomers, inexperienced and unimportant. But this was different. This was a chance to do something meaningful, something that could change how others viewed them. If they helped whoever sent the signal, it would show that humanity wasn't just about surviving. It was about helping others survive too. Rachel and Daniel took the signal to their captain, a stern but fair woman named Commander Lewis. After explaining what they had found, they made their case. "We should go," Rachel said firmly. "Whoever sent this needs our help." Commander Lewis hesitated. Space travel was dangerous, and the Solstice was far from Earth. Helping strangers might put the crew at risk, but she also knew that humanity had a responsibility to act when it could. Finally, she nodded. "All right," she said. "We'll investigate, but we move carefully." The journey to Xylos 4 took months. During that time, Rachel and Daniel prepared themselves for whatever they might find. They studied the signal, trying to learn as much as they could about the beings who had sent it. They also thought about what they would say when they arrived. How do you introduce yourself to an alien race? What if they didn't want help? What if they saw humans as enemies? As the Solstice approached Xylos 4, Rachel and Daniel stood side by side, looking out the window at the planet below. It wasn't what they had expected. From space, Xylos 4 looked barren and lifeless. Its surface was covered in swirling storms, and the atmosphere glowed faintly green. It didn't look like a place where anything could survive. "This doesn't look promising," Daniel muttered. "We won't know until we get closer," Rachel replied. Her voice was calm, but inside she felt a mix of excitement and dread. What if they were too late? What if the Vryn were already gone? When they landed, the scene was even worse than they had imagined. The ground was cracked and dry, and the air smelled strange like burning metal. The sky was dark, even though it was supposed to be daytime. Rachel and Daniel stepped out of the ship wearing protective suits, their boots crunching against the hard soil. They didn't have to wait long before they were greeted. A group of aliens emerged from the shadows. They were tall and slender, with translucent skin that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Their eyes were large and glowing, and their movements were slow and deliberate. One of them stepped forward, taller than the rest. This was Liren, the leader of the Vryn. "You are human?" Liren asked, his voice soft but clear. "Yes," Rachel answered. "We received your message. We've come to help." Liren tilted, his head studying them carefully. "Why would you come?" he asked. "No one else has." Rachel hesitated for a moment. She hadn't expected such a direct question. "Because no one should face this alone," she said finally. Her words seemed to resonate with Liren. For the first time, his expression softened. "Come," he said, gesturing for them to follow. "There is much to show you." As they walked, Liren explained the situation. The Vryn had once been a proud and advanced civilization, capable of incredible feats of engineering and science. But now they were struggling just to stay alive. Their cities, once grand and beautiful, were crumbling. Their technology, once cutting edge, was failing. And their people, once united, were divided by fear and despair. Rachel and Daniel listened carefully, taking in every detail. They knew the task ahead of them would be difficult, maybe even impossible. But they also knew they couldn't turn back now. They had promised to help, and they intended to keep that promise. By the time they reached the Vryn's underground bunker, Rachel and Daniel had a clearer picture of what they were up against. The Vryn needed more than just food or shelter. They needed a way to save their planet, and that was something Rachel and Daniel weren't sure they could provide. But they were determined to try. As they settled in for the night, Rachel couldn't stop thinking about the Vryn's plight. She wondered if they had done the right thing by coming here. Was it arrogance to think they could fix something so massive? Or was it courage? She didn't have the answers, but one thing was certain. They were here now, and they couldn't give up. Daniel noticed her quiet reflection and placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure it out," he said reassuringly. "We always do." Rachel nodded, forcing a small smile. "Let's hope so," she replied. And with that, they turned their attention to the challenges ahead, knowing that the fate of an entire species rested on their shoulders. The next morning, Rachel and Daniel woke up early. They had slept in a small room provided by the Vryn, their beds made of soft, spongy material that seemed to mold itself around them. It was comfortable, but neither of them had rested well. Their minds were too busy thinking about what they needed to do. Saving a planet wasn't something you could prepare for overnight, especially when you didn't even know where to start. Breakfast was a strange affair. The Vryn served them a kind of gelatinous food that shimmered faintly, much like their skin. Rachel and Daniel exchanged glances but decided not to ask too many questions. They ate slowly, trying not to focus on the texture. Liren joined them, watching silently as they finished their meal. "Today," Liren said, "you will see what remains of our world." Rachel nodded. "We're ready." Liren led them outside into the harsh environment of Xylos 4. The air was thick with dust, and the wind howled constantly, carrying sharp particles that stung their faces even through their protective suits. Rachel pulled her hood tighter, shielding herself from the relentless gusts. Daniel adjusted his visor, squinting against the dim light. The sky above was an eerie shade of greenish-gray, and the ground beneath their feet was cracked and dry, as if the planet itself was breaking apart. As they walked, Liren explained more about the history of Xylos 4. Long ago, the Vryn had built magnificent cities filled with towering spires made of crystal-like materials. These structures had shimmered in the sunlight, reflecting colors across the landscape. But now, those cities were ruins, Many of the buildings had collapsed, their once beautiful facades reduced to rubble. Others stood empty, hollow shells of what they used to be. The few remaining Vryn lived underground, away from the storms and the toxic air. Rachel stopped in front of one of the ruined towers. Its base was still intact, but the upper levels had crumbled, leaving jagged edges that looked like broken teeth. She reached out to touch it, feeling the smooth surface beneath her gloved hand. "It's beautiful," she said softly, "even in ruins." "It was our pride," Liren replied. His voice carried a note of sadness. "But pride cannot save us now." Daniel knelt down to examine the ground. He picked up a handful of dirt, letting it sift through his fingers. "This soil, it's completely dead," he said. "Nothing can grow here anymore." "That is why we need your help," Liren said. "Our atmosphere is failing, and without it we cannot survive." Rachel turned to him. "What caused this? Why is your planet dying?" Liren hesitated before answering. "It began with our sun. It has grown weaker over time, unable to sustain life as it once did. We tried to adapt, to find ways to compensate, but every solution failed. Now, we are running out of options." Daniel frowned. "You mentioned earlier that you tried reaching out to others. Did anyone respond?" "No," Liren said simply. "Many heard our call, but none answered. Some ignored us entirely. Others sent messages saying they could not or would not help." Rachel felt a pang of anger at that. How could anyone turn their backs on a civilization in need? But then, she remembered Earth's own struggles. Humanity wasn't perfect either. There were times when people chose selfishness over kindness. Still, she couldn't understand why no one had come to help the Vryn. Surely there must have been advanced species capable of restoring a planet's atmosphere or finding another way to save them. "We're here now," Rachel said firmly, "and we'll do everything we can." Liren studied her for a moment, his glowing eyes unreadable. "You truly believe you can succeed where others have failed?" "I don't know," Rachel admitted, "but I believe in trying. Giving up isn't an option." Liren nodded slowly. "Then let us begin." Over the next few hours, Rachel and Daniel toured the Vryn's underground bunker. It was a sprawling network of tunnels and chambers carved deep into the planet's crust. The walls were lined with glowing crystals that provided light, casting everything in a soft, ethereal glow. Despite its functional design, the bunker felt suffocating to Rachel. The air was stale, and the constant hum of machinery echoed through the corridors. She couldn't imagine living like this, cut off from the sky and the stars. In one chamber, they found rows of machines designed to purify the air. Most of them were broken, their parts scattered across the floor. A group of Vryn worked tirelessly to repair them, though progress was slow. In another chamber, they saw tanks filled with water carefully rationed and monitored. Food supplies were stored in sealed containers, labeled with dates that showed just how little they had left. "This is all we have," Liren said. "Without help, it will not last." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, thinking hard. "We need to stabilize your atmosphere first," he said. "If we can fix that, everything else might follow." "But how?" Rachel asked. "Even if we had the technology, it would take years to implement." Daniel shrugged. "We'll figure it out, we always do." That night, back in their room, Rachel and Daniel sat together, brainstorming ideas. They went over every piece of equipment they had brought with them, every tool and gadget. None of it seemed sufficient for the task at hand. They needed something bigger, something revolutionary. "What if we modified the terraforming device?" Daniel suggested suddenly. Rachel blinked. "The prototype, that thing barely works." "It doesn't have to work perfectly," Daniel said. "Just enough to give us a starting point. If we can amplify its effects somehow." Rachel leaned forward, intrigued. "How would we do that?" Daniel hesitated. "I'm not sure yet, but maybe the Vryn have resources we can use. Something native to their planet that could boost the device's power." Rachel nodded slowly. "It's worth a shot." The next day, they approached Liren with their idea. At first, he seemed skeptical. You wish to modify your machine using our resources, he asked. Yes, Rachel said. Do you have any materials or minerals that are unique to Xylos 4? Something that might enhance the device's capabilities? Liren thought for a moment. There is a mineral buried deep within our planet, he said. It is rare and difficult to extract, but it possesses properties unlike anything else. Perhaps it could aid you. Where is it? Daniel asked eagerly. Liren hesitated again. It lies in the dead zone, a region of extreme radiation and instability. Few who venture there return. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. Is there any other option? Liren shook his head. If you wish to save us, you must retrieve the mineral yourselves. Rachel and Daniel exchanged a glance. Neither of them liked the idea of entering such a dangerous area, but they didn't have a choice. If this mineral was their only hope, they had to try. We'll go, Rachel said finally. Liren looked at them, his expression unreadable. Very well. I will provide you with maps and guidance. But remember, the dead zone does not forgive mistakes. Preparations took several days. The Vryn equipped Rachel and Daniel with specialized suits designed to withstand high levels of radiation. They also gave them tools for digging and extracting the mineral. Liren warned them repeatedly about the dangers they would face, but Rachel and Daniel remained resolute. On the morning of their departure, the entire Vryn community gathered to see them off. Some looked hopeful, while others seemed resigned to failure. Rachel and Daniel climbed into a small rover-like vehicle, its engine humming softly as it prepared for the journey ahead. As they drove away from the bunker, Rachel glanced back at the crowd. She saw Liren standing tall, his glowing eyes watching them until they disappeared into the horizon. She turned her attention back to the road, gripping the controls tightly. We've got this, Daniel said, breaking the silence. Rachel smiled faintly. Yeah. Let's just hope the dead zone agrees. The journey to the dead zone was long and grueling. The landscape grew increasingly barren, the storms fiercer and the temperature colder. By the time they arrived, both Rachel and Daniel were exhausted, but there was no time to rest. They suited up and stepped out into the heart of the dead zone, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did they know the hardest part of their mission was only beginning. The dead zone was unlike anything Rachel and Daniel had ever seen. The ground was covered in jagged rocks, sharp and uneven, as if the planet itself had been torn apart. The air shimmered with heat waves, even though the temperature was freezing. Strange, glowing cracks ran through the surface, pulsing faintly like veins of light beneath the crust. Radiation levels were so high that their suits' alarms beeped constantly, warning them to stay alert. Rachel adjusted her helmet, trying to ignore the anxiety building inside her. This place feels wrong, she said, her voice trembling, slightly over the comms. Daniel nodded, his movements stiff as he stepped carefully across the uneven terrain. It's not just the radiation. Something about this area feels alive. They moved cautiously, following the map Liren had given them. According to the Vryn leader, the mineral they needed, called calithium, was buried deep underground near one of the largest glowing fissures. The closer they got, the more unstable the environment became. The ground shook periodically, sending small avalanches of rocks tumbling down slopes. Dust clouds swirled around them, making it hard to see clearly. After hours of slow progress, they finally reached the fissure. It was massive, stretching wide enough to swallow their rover whole. Glowing blue energy seeped out from its depths, casting an eerie light on their surroundings. Rachel knelt at the edge, scanning the area with a handheld device. The readings are off the charts here, she said. This has to be it. Daniel set up a portable drilling rig while Rachel prepared the extraction tools. Neither of them spoke much. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every sound, the hum of their equipment, the crackle of static in their suits, the distant rumble of shifting earth, felt amplified in the oppressive silence of the dead zone. As the drill bit into the ground, the vibrations grew stronger. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to shift. A loud cracking noise echoed through the air, and Rachel shouted, "Daniel, move!" They scrambled back just in time as a section of the fissure collapsed, sending debris flying everywhere. The Drill tipped over, sparks flying from its damaged circuits. Daniel cursed under his breath, rushing to stabilize it before it fell completely into the chasm. "This place doesn't want us here," he muttered, his hands working quickly to secure the rig. Rachel didn't respond. She was too focused on the readings from her scanner. The calithium was close, just a few meters deeper, but extracting it safely would be nearly impossible now. The fissure was widening, and the ground felt like it could give way at any moment. "We don't have much time," she said urgently. "If we don't get the mineral soon, the entire site might collapse." Daniel nodded, his jaw clenched in determination. "Then let's make every second count." Working together, they managed to reposition the drill and continued digging. The process was painstakingly slow, each meter taking longer than the last. The radiation levels kept climbing, forcing them to rely on their suits' emergency shielding. Sweat dripped down their faces despite the freezing temperatures outside. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the drill struck something solid. A low hum filled the air as the scanner confirmed it. Calithium. Rachel exhaled in relief. "We found it," she whispered, but their victory was short-lived. As Daniel lowered the extraction tool into the hole, another tremor hit. This one was stronger than the last, shaking the ground violently. Rocks tumbled down from above, narrowly missing them. Rachel grabbed onto a nearby boulder to steady herself, her heart pounding. "We need to hurry," she shouted. "I'm going, as fast as I can." Daniel replied, his voice strained. His hands moved furiously, operating the controls of the extraction tool. Slowly, painfully, slowly, a small chunk of calithium emerged from the ground. It glowed faintly, its surface smooth and glass-like, radiating an otherworldly energy. "Got it," Daniel yelled, grabbing the mineral and securing it in a protective container. "Let's get out of here." They didn't need to be told twice. Picking up their gear, they sprinted back toward the rover, dodging falling rocks and bursts of glowing energy erupting from the fissure. Just as they reached the vehicle, the ground behind them gave way entirely, swallowing the drill and everything else they had left behind. Breathing heavily, Rachel and Daniel climbed into the rover and sealed the hatch. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply sat there staring at the chaos unfolding outside their window. "That was too close," Daniel said finally, breaking the silence. Rachel nodded, clutching the container holding the calithium. "But we did it. We actually did it." Back at the bunker, the Vryn greeted them with cautious optimism. Liren examined the mineral closely, his glowing eyes widening in awe. "You have retrieved calithium," he said. "Few thought it possible." "It wasn't easy," Daniel admitted, rubbing his sore shoulders. "But we're here to help no matter what it takes." Liren turned to Rachel. "And now? What is your plan?" Rachel explained their idea to modify the terraforming device using the calithium. "If we integrate this mineral into the machine, it might amplify its effects enough to stabilize your atmosphere," she said. "But it's going to take some trial and error." Liren nodded gravely. "Time is not on our side. You must work quickly." Over the next several days, Rachel and Daniel threw themselves into the task. They dismantled the prototype terraformer, studying its components and figuring out how to incorporate the calithium. The mineral's energy was unpredictable, surging, in ways they couldn't fully control. More than once, their experiments caused minor explosions or power surges, forcing them to start over. Despite the setbacks, they refused to give up. The Vryn pitched in wherever they could, providing assistance and moral support. Some helped recalibrate the machine's sensors, while others scoured their archives for old research that might offer clues. Even Liren joined in, sharing his knowledge of Xylos 4's unique properties. One evening, as they worked late into the night, Rachel looked up from her station and noticed Daniel staring intently at the calithium. Its glow illuminated his face, casting shadows that made him look older than he was. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I was just wondering, what happens if this doesn't work? If we fail, the Vryn won't have anything left to fall back on." Rachel set down her tools and walked over to him. "We can't think like that," she said firmly. We've come too far to doubt ourselves now. Besides, we owe it to them to try our best. Daniel smiled faintly. You're right. Let's keep pushing forward. With renewed determination, they dove back into their work. Slowly but surely, they began to make progress. The Calithium's energy started to stabilize, syncing with the terraformers' systems in ways they hadn't anticipated. By the end of the week, they had a functioning prototype ready for testing. The day of the test arrived, and the entire Vryn community gathered to watch. Rachel and Daniel stood beside the terraformer, their hearts racing with anticipation. Liren approached them, his expression unreadable. Are you certain this will work? He asked. No, Rachel admitted, but we believe it will. That's all we have right now. Liren nodded. Then proceed. With a deep breath, Rachel activated the machine. At first, nothing happened. The hum of the terraformer grew louder, vibrating through the chamber, but there were no visible changes. Doubt crept into Rachel's mind. Had they miscalculated? Was this all for nothing? Then, suddenly, the ground trembled. A burst of energy shot upward from the terraformer, spreading outward in a wave of light. The walls of the bunker shimmered, and the glowing crystals embedded in them flared brightly. Outside, the storms that had raged for years began to weaken, their ferocity fading. Cheers erupted among the Vryn. Liren stepped forward, his eyes wide with wonder. It is working, he said softly. You have done it. Rachel and Daniel exchanged a glance, relief washing over them. They had succeeded, not perfectly, but enough to make a difference. The atmosphere wouldn't recover overnight, but the process had begun. With time, Xylos 4 might heal itself. As the celebration continued around them, Rachel allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. They had faced countless challenges, pushed themselves to their limits, and risked their lives to save a species they barely knew. But in doing so, they had proven something important, not just to the Vryn, but to themselves. Humanity wasn't defined by its technology or its power. It was defined by its willingness to help others, even when the odds seemed impossible. And that, Rachel realized, was a legacy worth fighting for. The success of the terraformers' test brought a wave of hope to the Vryn. For the first time in years, they allowed themselves to believe that their planet might survive. The storms outside had weakened significantly, and the air felt slightly cleaner, less oppressive. But Rachel and Daniel knew better than to celebrate too soon. The machine was only a prototype, and its effects were temporary. If they wanted to truly save Xylos 4, they needed to refine the technology and make it sustainable. Over the next few days, Rachel and Daniel worked tirelessly to improve the terraformer. They analyzed data from the initial test, looking for ways to enhance its efficiency. The Calithium was powerful, but it wasn't limitless. Every burst of energy drained the mineral slightly, and they couldn't afford to waste it. They had to find a balance, enough power to stabilize the atmosphere without depleting their only source of amplification. Liren stayed close, observing their progress with quiet admiration. Your determination is remarkable, he said, one evening as they took a short break. Few would endure such hardship for strangers. Rachel smiled faintly, wiping grease from her hands. It's not about being strangers, she replied. We're all part of the same galaxy. Helping each other is what keeps us going. Liren nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps humanity is more advanced than we realized, not in technology, but in spirit. Daniel chuckled softly. If only Earth could hear you say that. Most people back home wouldn't agree. As they continued their work, tensions began to rise among the Vryn. Not everyone shared Liren's optimism. Some doubted whether the humans could really save them. Others argued that relying on outsiders was a mistake, that the Vryn should focus on leaving Xylos 4 instead of trying to fix it. These voices grew louder as the days passed, creating friction within the community. One night, Rachel overheard a heated argument between two groups of Vryn. One side believed in staying and supporting Rachel and Daniel's efforts. The other insisted it was time to abandon the planet and seek refuge elsewhere. The debate escalated quickly, emotions running high. Rachel hesitated, unsure if she should intervene. They're scared, Daniel said, appearing beside her. Who can blame them? Their world is falling apart and they don't know who to trust. Rachel sighed. But splitting up won't help anyone. If they leave now, they'll have nowhere to go, and if they stay, they need to work together. You're right, Daniel said. Maybe it's time we reminded them why they should stick around. The next morning, Rachel and Daniel called a meeting with the Vryn. Liren stood beside them, his presence lending authority to their words. Rachel stepped forward, addressing the crowd. We know you're afraid, she began. And you have every right to be. Your planet is dying and no one should have to face that alone. But giving up isn't the answer. Running away won't solve your problems, it will only delay them. She paused, letting her words sink in. This machine isn't perfect, but it's working. With your help, we can make it stronger, more reliable. Together, we can give Xylos 4 a chance to heal. Daniel added, You're not just fighting for yourselves. You're fighting for future generations. Do you really want to leave this place behind? For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. A young Vryn woman stepped forward, her voice steady despite her youth. She's right. We owe it to our ancestors, and to our children, to try. Others nodded, their doubts easing. Liren raised a hand, signaling for quiet. Then let us unite once more, he said, for the sake of our people and for the sake of this world. With renewed purpose, the Vryn threw themselves into the effort. They worked alongside Rachel and Daniel, contributing their skills and knowledge. Some helped gather materials to reinforce the terraformer, while others studied ancient texts for insights into environmental restoration. Even those who had been skeptical joined in, their fears replaced by determination. As the and days turned into weeks, progress accelerated. The terraformer grew more efficient, its bursts of energy lasting longer and covering wider areas. The storms outside became weaker, and patches of green began to appear on the barren landscape. It was a slow process, but the signs of recovery were undeniable. Despite the improvements, the strain of their mission began to take its toll. Rachel and Daniel rarely slept, their bodies exhausted from constant work. Their supplies were running low and communication with Earth had become sporadic due to interference from Xylos 4's unstable atmosphere. Still, they refused to give up. One afternoon, as they monitored the terraformer's latest output, Daniel noticed something alarming. The calithium's glow had dimmed noticeably. He called Rachel over, pointing at the mineral. It's losing energy faster than before, he said. At this rate, we'll run out sooner than we thought. Rachel frowned, examining the readings. We need another source of amplification, she said. Something to supplement the calithium. But where do we find that? Daniel asked. We used up everything we brought with us. Rachel thought for a moment. What about the crystals in the bunker? The ones lighting the tunnels? They must have some kind of energy properties. Maybe we can use them. Daniel nodded. Worth a shot. Let's talk to Liren. When they approached Liren with their idea, he hesitated. Those crystals are vital to our survival, he explained. They provide light and heat in the bunkers. Without them, we would be in darkness. I understand, Rachel said. But if we don't stabilize the atmosphere, none of that will matter. We're not asking for all of them, just enough to keep the terraformer going. Liren stared at her for a long moment, weighing the risks. Finally, he nodded. Very well, take what you need. With the crystals integrated into the system, the terraformer's performance improved dramatically. Its energy bursts became more consistent, and the effects spread further across the planet. The storms vanished entirely in some regions, revealing skies that hadn't been seen in decades. Plants began to sprout in areas where nothing had grown for years, but the victory came at a cost. The crystal's removal left parts of the bunker dark and cold, forcing the Vryn to adapt to harsher living conditions. Some grumbled about the decision, but most understood the necessity. They had sacrificed comfort before. They could do it again. As the transformation of Xylos 4 continued, Rachel and Daniel found themselves reflecting on their journey. They had faced countless obstacles from the dangers of the dead zone to the doubts of the Vryn. Yet through perseverance and teamwork, they had achieved something extraordinary. They had given a dying world a second chance. One evening, as they stood outside watching the horizon, Rachel turned to Daniel. "Do you think we'll ever see this place fully healed?" she asked. Daniel shrugged. "Maybe not in our lifetime, but we've laid the foundation. That's what matters." Rachel smiled. "Yeah, and who knows? Maybe someday humans and Vryn will explore the stars together." Daniel grinned. "Now that's a future I'd like to see." The road ahead was still long, and challenges remained. But for the first time since arriving on Xylos 4, Rachel and Daniel allowed themselves to feel a sense of accomplishment. They had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, compassion and ingenuity could make a difference. And that was a lesson they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. The changes on Xylos 4 were becoming more visible with each passing day. The once barren landscape was slowly transforming into something resembling life. Patches of green dotted the cracked earth, and small streams began to form as the atmosphere stabilized further. The storms that had ravaged the planet for decades were now rare, replaced by calm skies and faint sunlight filtering through the thinning haze. It was far from perfect, but it was progress, and for the Vryn, progress felt like a miracle. Rachel and Daniel stood outside the bunker one morning, watching as a group of Vryn worked to plant seeds in freshly tilled soil. They had salvaged what little vegetation they could find and were attempting to grow crops again. It was risky. The soil was still poor, and the conditions harsh. But hope drove them forward. For the first time in years, they dared to dream of a future where they wouldn't have to rely solely on rationed supplies. "They're amazing," Rachel said softly, her voice filled with admiration. "Look at them. Even after everything they've been through, they're still trying." Daniel nodded, shading his eyes against the weak sunlight. "Yeah, they've got grit. I'll give them that." Rachel glanced at him, smiling faintly. "You sound impressed." "Well, yeah," Daniel admitted. "I mean, we came here to help, but honestly, they've done most of the heavy lifting themselves. We just gave them a push." As they observed the scene, Liren approached them. His demeanor was calmer now, less burdened by the weight of leadership. He stopped beside them, gazing out at the fields. "This is beautiful," he murmured. "To see life returning to our world, it feels like a dream." "It's not a dream," Rachel said firmly. "It's real, and it's because of you and your people. You didn't give up, even when things looked impossible." Liren turned to her, his glowing eyes softening. "And neither did you. Without your courage, none of this would have been possible." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, unused to such praise. "We couldn't have done it alone," he said. "It was teamwork, plain and simple." Liren smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but teamwork requires trust, and trust is something few species are willing to offer strangers." The conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion near the fields. One of the Vryn workers shouted, pointing toward the horizon. Rachel squinted, trying to make out what had caught their attention. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just the rolling plains stretching endlessly. Then she noticed it, a faint shimmer like heat waves rising from the ground, moving steadily closer. "What is that?" Daniel asked, frowning. Liren stiffened, his expression darkening. "Trouble," he said grimly. Before anyone could react, the shimmer resolved into a shape, a massive creature unlike anything Rachel or Daniel had ever seen. It moved low to the ground, its body rippling as though made of liquid metal. Its head was broad and flat, with no discernible eyes, but it seemed to sense their presence. As it drew nearer, the ground trembled beneath its weight. Panic spread among the Vryn. Some scrambled to retrieve weapons, while others ran back toward the safety of the bunker. Rachel grabbed Liren's arm. "What is that thing?" "A predator," Liren replied tersely. "They used to roam these lands before the storms drove them underground. Now that the weather has calmed, they've returned. Can we stop it?" Daniel asked, already reaching for the tools they carried. Liren shook his head. "It is too large, too strong. Our weapons cannot harm it." Rachel's mind raced. If the creature attacked the fields, or worse, the bunker, it could undo all the progress they had made. There had to be a way to drive it away without causing harm. She glanced at the terraformer which hummed softly nearby. An idea began to form. "We might not need weapons," she said quickly. "We can use the terraformer." Daniel stared at her. "Are you serious? That thing barely works as it is. What if it overloads?" "It won't," Rachel insisted. "We've stabilized it enough to handle short bursts. If we direct the energy at the creature, it might scare it off." Liren listened intently, then nodded. "Do it. We have no other choice." Working quickly, Rachel and Daniel adjusted the terraformer's settings. They aimed it toward the approaching predator, focusing its energy output into a concentrated beam. The machine whirred loudly as it powered up, vibrations shaking the ground beneath their feet. When the beam fired, it struck the creature squarely. The effect was immediate. The predator froze, its metallic body rippling wildly as though confused by the surge of energy. After a moment, it let out an ear-splitting screech and retreated, slinking back across the plains until it disappeared from view. The Vryn erupted into cheers, their relief palpable. Rachel exhaled sharply, her hands trembling as she lowered the controls. Daniel clapped her on the shoulder. "Nice thinking," he said. "That was genius." Rachel managed a shaky smile. "Let's just hope it doesn't come back." Later, that evening, Rachel and Daniel sat together in their quarters, exhausted but triumphant. The encounter with the predator had been terrifying, but it also reinforced how far they had come. When they first arrived on Xylos 4, they were outsiders struggling to understand the Vryn's plight. Now, they were integral members of their community, working side by side to rebuild a shattered world. "You know," Daniel said, breaking the silence, "we've done something pretty incredible here." Rachel nodded, staring at the wall thoughtfully. "Yeah, but it's not over yet. There's still so much to do." "I know," Daniel said. "But for once I feel like we're actually making a difference, like maybe humanity isn't as bad as everyone thinks." Rachel chuckled softly. "Speak for yourself. I think humanity's okay." They shared a laugh, the tension of the day easing slightly. For all the challenges they had faced, moments like this reminded them why they had chosen this path. Helping others wasn't just about technology or resources. It was about connection, about proving that compassion transcended differences. The next morning, Rachel and Daniel joined the Vryn in their ongoing efforts to restore Xylos 4. Fields were expanded, irrigation systems improved, and new shelters constructed. Slowly but surely, the planet was coming back to life. The Vryn, inspired by the humans' determination, poured their energy into the work. Even those who had doubted Rachel and Daniel's abilities now contributed enthusiastically. One afternoon, as Rachel helped repair a damaged irrigation pipe, Liren approached her. "There is something I must show you," he said. Intrigued, Rachel followed him to a secluded chamber deep within the bunker. Inside, she found a collection of artifacts, ancient tools, tablets etched with symbols and fragments of machinery. Liren gestured to the items. "These are relics of our past," he explained. "Before the storms, before the decay, we were a great civilization. These objects remind us of what we once were, and what we can become again." Rachel examined the artifacts carefully, marveling at their craftsmanship. "They're incredible," she said. "You've preserved so much." Liren nodded. "And now, thanks to you, we may have a chance to reclaim it." As they left the chamber, Rachel felt a renewed sense of purpose. Saving Xylos 4 wasn't just about survival. It was about restoring pride, identity, and hope. By helping the Vryn rebuild their world, she and Daniel were also helping them rediscover who they were. That night, as they prepared for bed, Daniel voiced a question that had been lingering in both their minds. "Do you think we'll ever see this place fully restored, like truly thriving?" Rachel hesitated, then shrugged. "Maybe not in our lifetime, but that's okay. What matters is that we started something. The Vryn will carry it forward." Daniel grinned. Guess we'll have to leave a note for whoever comes after us. Dear future explorers, humanity tried really hard here. Rachel laughed. Something like that. Despite the uncertainties ahead, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet satisfaction. They had faced countless trials and emerged stronger for it. Together, they had proven that even in the vastness of the galaxy, kindness and perseverance could spark change. And as they drifted off to sleep, they knew one thing for certain. Their journey on Xylos 4 would leave a lasting legacy, not just for the Vryn, but for humanity itself. The final days on Xylos 4 passed in a blur of activity. Rachel and Daniel worked alongside the Vryn to ensure the terraformer was stable enough to continue functioning without their direct oversight. They had done everything they could to teach the Vryn how to maintain and repair the machine, but it was still a fragile system. The Calithium's energy reserves were dwindling, and while the crystals provided some amplification, they couldn't sustain the device indefinitely. Liren watched them closely during these last preparations, his glowing eyes filled with gratitude. "You have given us more than technology," he said one evening as they walked through the newly green fields. "You have given us hope." Rachel smiled faintly, brushing her fingers against the soft leaves of a young plant. "Hope is powerful," she replied. "But it's your strength that will carry you forward. We just helped light the way." Daniel nodded in agreement. "And hey, if you ever need us again, send another message. We'll come running." Liren chuckled softly, though there was a note of sadness in his voice. "I hope it does not come to that. But if it does, know that you will always be welcome here." As their departure drew near, the Vryn organized a ceremony to honor Rachel and Daniel. It was held outside under the pale stars, the first time many of them had ventured above ground in years. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the faint scent of growing plants. Torches made from glowing crystals illuminated the gathering, casting warm light across the faces of those who had come to say goodbye. Liren stood at the center, addressing the crowd. "Today we celebrate two humans who risked everything to save a species not their own. Their actions remind us that kindness exists beyond our world, and that unity can overcome even the greatest challenges." He turned to Rachel and Daniel, holding out two small objects wrapped in shimmering cloth. "These are gifts for you," he said, "symbols of our gratitude and friendship." Rachel unwrapped hers first, revealing a shard of Calithium encased in a delicate frame. It glowed faintly, pulsing with a gentle rhythm. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you." Daniel opened his gift next, finding a small crystal etched with intricate patterns. Liren explained that it contained a recording of the Vryn's history and culture preserved for future generations. "So that you may never forget us," he added. Rachel felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "We won't," she promised. "How could we?" After the ceremony, the Vryn lingered, sharing stories and laughter with their human allies. For the first time in what felt like forever, the mood was light, filled with optimism rather than despair. Children played among the fields, their laughter echoing into the night. Elders told tales of Xylos 4's golden age, painting vivid pictures of a world long gone but slowly returning. When the moment came to leave, Rachel and Daniel stood beside the solstice, their bags packed and ready. The Vryn gathered around them, silent but supportive. Liren stepped forward, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. "Go safely," he said. "And remember, you are not alone in this galaxy." "We'll remember," Rachel replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Take care of yourselves and this place." With one final wave, they climbed aboard the ship and sealed the hatch. As the engines roared to life, Rachel looked out the window, watching the Vryn grow smaller and smaller until they disappeared entirely. She leaned back in her seat, letting out a long breath. "Well," Daniel said, breaking the silence. "That was quite the adventure." Rachel laughed softly, shaking her head. Understatement of the century. The journey back to Earth was long and quiet. They spent much of their time reflecting on everything they had experienced, from the desperate broadcast that brought them to Xylos 4 to the battles they fought, both literal and figurative, They had been pushed to their limits. Yet, they had also discovered strengths within themselves they hadn't known existed. "I keep thinking about what Liren said," Rachel admitted one day as they floated through the vast emptiness of space. "About kindness existing beyond our world." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other civilizations out there are struggling, hoping someone will hear their cry for help?" "Too many, probably," Rachel said. "But maybe humanity can be part of the solution. Not because we're perfect, but because we're willing to try." "That's a big responsibility," Daniel said, smirking slightly. "Think Earth's ready for that?" Rachel shrugged. "Maybe not yet, but we've taken the first step. Who knows where it might lead?" When they finally returned to Earth, their arrival sparked widespread attention. News of their mission spread quickly, capturing the imaginations of people around the globe. Humanity, often seen as inexperienced and untested among the galactic community, had proven itself capable of compassion and ingenuity. Leaders praised Rachel and Daniel's efforts, calling them heroes. Scientists studied their data, eager to learn more about terraforming and interstellar cooperation. But for Rachel and Daniel, the true reward wasn't fame or recognition. It was knowing they had made a difference, not just for the Vryn, but for humanity's place in the universe. By answering a plea for help when others had turned away, they had shown that kindness transcended boundaries, whether cultural, planetary, or cosmic. In the weeks that followed, Rachel and Daniel were invited to speak at conferences, schools, and research facilities. They shared their story, emphasizing the importance of empathy and collaboration. "We're not the strongest species out there," Rachel told an audience one day. "We're not the smartest or the most advanced, but we have something special, the ability to care for others even when it's hard." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring countless individuals to think beyond their own borders. Projects aimed at aiding struggling planets gained momentum, and Earth began taking steps toward becoming a more active member of the galactic community. Meanwhile, Rachel and Daniel continued their work, exploring new worlds and seeking opportunities to make a positive impact. They knew their journey was far from over. The galaxy was vast and there would always be challenges ahead. But they faced those challenges with confidence, knowing they weren't alone. One evening, as they sat together under the stars, Rachel pulled out the shard of calithium Liren had given her. Its glow was fainter now, its energy nearly depleted. Still, it served as a reminder of what they had accomplished and what was possible when determination met compassion. "You think the Vryn are doing okay?" Daniel asked, gazing up at the constellations. "I think so," Rachel replied. "They're tough and they've got each other." Daniel smiled. "And us too, if they need us." Rachel nodded, tucking the shard back into her pocket. "Yeah, us too." As the night stretched on, they sat in comfortable silence, dreaming of the adventures yet to come. The galaxy was full of mysteries, dangers, and wonders, but it was also full of potential. Potential for connection, growth, and change. And, thanks to Rachel and Daniel, humanity had taken its first real step toward claiming a meaningful role in that grand tapestry. For the first time in a long time, the future felt bright.